There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hey there, this is the No Filter podcast, and I'm Mia Friedman. And look, I often start these episodes by saying I had a lot of questions for my guest, but I don't think that's ever been as true as in this episode, because I'm interviewing a male escort whose, I was going to say his stage name, but his sex name is Mitch Larsson. His real name is not Mitch Larsson, but he needed a sex working name because he'd been a lawyer, he was a stay-at-home dad when he started, and he wanted some privacy. Nobody in his life knew what he did, except for his wife at first. And I wanted to know about the first time he got paid for sex. Did he have performance anxiety? How much did it cost? Who hires a man for sex? It's not who you would think. Or maybe it is, but there's a lot of different reasons that women hired Mitch for sex. Some of them were married to men who didn't want to have sex with them anymore. Some of them were recovering from a breakup. One of them was terminally ill. It's just a fascinating story. We talked about how he managed to get it up, really, what a woman looked like or whether he was attracted to her, how that wasn't actually the deciding factor in how into it he was. That'll surprise you as well. It certainly surprised me.
It's about that mental connection. It's about feeling wanted, me feeling wanted and making them feel wanted. And that usually got me erect and got me, turned on.
We talked about the awkward time he tried to do a porno and the very, very funny conversation he had with his wife about it. And it's a beautiful story. He's a lovely man. Since this conversation, he's become a writer for Mamamia because he just really wants to help women. Enjoy this interview. I really did. And if you're wondering why I call him Dan, that's his real name. So he came out publicly to his friends and his family before he released his memoir a couple of months ago. It's called Time for Her. So now it's all out in the open, and it meant that I had full license to ask all the questions that are probably going through your head right now. Enjoy this interview with male escort Mitch Larsson, also known as Dan. Dan, can you tell me about the first time you were ever paid for sex?
First time was about a week after I started advertising.
How old were you?
I was 41.
And where were you at in your life?
I was married. How old was my son back then? He would have been 4, I think, roughly, 4 or 5. I had been trying to get work as a photographer for quite a while after bringing up my son, being a stay-at-home dad. Personally, my marriage was, I wouldn't say rocky. It wasn't great. But I'd done some things that I'd regretted, as I mentioned in the book. It wasn't a physical affair that I had, but I had had a text affair with a person, and that was just as painful for my wife as a physical one would be, I imagine. So we had to mix things up a bit. We were stagnant, and I asked if I could be with somebody else because we were slightly mismatched in the bedroom, and that was causing a few issues.
That's a great way to recover from being caught cheating on text, to ask if you can sleep with someone else.
Well, it's honesty. I mean, that's what I spruik whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let there be any surprises in your marriage or anything like that if
When
possible.
you say you were mismatched in the bedroom, what did you want and how often did you want it? What did the gap look like?
I wanted it more than once every day. I would find myself waking up hoping that it might happen and suggesting, maybe tonight we might be able to.
She was a doctor.
She was, yeah. So she'd be flat out with running life and running our son as well. So, if it got to the end of the day and I'd got knocked back, I'd be like, oh, and it caused us both anguish, I think. And,
yeah.
I was frustrated and she was frustrated that I was and wanted to give me more, but, wasn't able to. So
how often were you having sex?
On average, maybe once a week, I think, which is a fair bit. I know for a lot of married people, that's actually quite a bit, but I've got a pretty high sex drive, as you gather.
Did she want to have sex once a week, or was she kind of throwing you a bone because she knew that you needed it?
I did get the sense she was throwing me a bone, so to speak, not the other way around.
Throwing you a boner.
So I got that sense,
Yeah.
and I didn't like that. I mean, I don't want to pressure anyone into anything, and if she wasn't completely comfortable and into it, then it made me feel bad.
So what were the rules that you settled on with opening your marriage?
Well, I mentioned it to her, and then she literally researched it to the nth degree for a couple of weeks. She was Googling the viability of doing it and podcasts and various
About
forums.
Open marriages.
Yeah, about having an open marriage and how successful it actually is and, long term. And then she said, okay, she wasn't obviously particularly happy about it, but she'd sort of resigned herself to it. And I said to her as well, by you allowing me, I've got to wrap my head around with you, with another guy or girl or whatever,
Did she express any interest in wanting to do that?
Yeah, she did. She sort of allowed her mind to wander and we spoke about it a bit. And just that feeling at that time, even though I hadn't actually done anything, I just still remember it felt like I'd grown wings or something, like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, not at the thought of sleeping with someone else, but just the prospect of being able to. Like I could sort of, I could walk around and sort of look at women and imagine for the first time in, what was 9 years at the time. I know I'm not really being such an advocate for men saying this, but it was the truth. It's how it felt at the time.
Oh, I mean, I think everyone's human. Just because you're in a committed relationship doesn't mean you're not sexually attracted to other people, but you were exhilarated by the idea that it was possible.
Yeah, exactly. Exhilarated. Perfect word. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And was it very much you can do it, but like you can't do it with that woman that you were texting, or you can't do it with anyone more than once? Like, what were the boundaries put on it?
There were no spoken boundaries. The person I was texting, definitely not. Even if I could have, I wouldn't have, because that was such a sore point for her.
So it felt like such a betrayal.
Yeah, and it just would have dug the knife in further. There was no way I was going to put her through that. It was just, don't tell her about it.
Oh, so it was a don't ask, don't tell
Don't ask,
situation.
don't tell. Yeah. And I did. I slept with somebody else after all that time, and it was okay. It was all right. It wasn't phenomenal, but it was done. I really respect and love her for allowing me for having done that.
So you only did it once?
I saw that one person once, and then the escort idea came into my head. I thought, well, is this possible? Because I was sort of mulling it over, and I started sort of going onto Tinder because I wasn't sure like if I was any good or if I could sleep with someone with a condom on anymore, because we hadn't ended a marriage, obviously. And I think it was maybe 2 other people before I took the plunge and actually went into doing it professionally.
What was the appeal? Was it the money? Was it the clarity of boundaries?
Of the job?
Yeah. Because that's quite a big, I would assume, quite a big leap to make, right? From having an open marriage and sleeping with other women to then making it your job and being paid for it. Yeah.
I don't lie, the appeal was the money, because I'm a bit old school. I wanted to chip into the household funds, and all I was doing was getting the odd $500, $2,000 job every sort of, month or so. The thought of making money was appealing. And then when I first did make money, I put it on the counter and it was like, I'm contributing to the household now. It felt wonderful. Like, this is now our money, So
how do you raise that? Like, I'm thinking about I shouldn't say beleaguered wife, because I shouldn't make her sound like a victim in this, but I'm like imagining her coming home from her shift at work one day and you going, I'd like to open our marriage. And then a little while later going, how would you feel if I became an escort?
Yeah.
These are big hurdles mentally to get over. How did she react to that?
She reacted really well, actually. She was, I don't want to say excited, but I do want to say excited, because she kind of was. And in a funny way, she was actually kind of turned on by it, the thought of women.
More than you doing it for free.
Yeah. Like women actually wanting to be with her husband and paying to be with her husband. I think that made her proud, which is a huge testament to her. I agree. I mean, she's just been incredible. And it wasn't a miserable time, as a lot of people might think. It was kind of an exciting time for us. The only reason it didn't work, was it just got so busy and Mitch started to take over Dan. That's when it went a bit south.
You talk about that first time putting the money on the table. Can you take me back to the beginning of that client and that experience? Like, how does a regular guy from the suburbs who's a lawyer by trade, a stay-at-home dad, how does he even find himself in someone's house being paid to have sex?
I looked up the biggest directories in the country. So I Googled basically male escorts, Sydney male escorts, Melbourne male escorts, Brisbane, to see who were the big guys. And there was 1 or 2 in particular. So
agencies or individuals?
Individuals, just directories. So you pay them a certain amount per month to have your picture up there.
Oh, the directories, not the actual When you say the big guys, I thought you meant the actual male escorts.
No.
I thought you were checking out the competition.
No. Oh, I did check out the competition too, definitely, yeah, just to see what I could do and what I could do better and what was on offer. I just got a sort of an idea of the good and the bad, and I did a lot of Googling on some bad experiences and where other guys had gone wrong, and I thought, well, okay, that's something, to pay attention to, just various things like some guys falling asleep, for God's sake, all sorts of things that happen. So then I just put some photos up because I had all the equipment and everything, and my beautiful wife at the time actually helped me take them. Like I'd frame the shots and everything, and then I'd edit them later on, put them on the directory.
Were they nudes?
No, definitely not.
What do women want to see? Like,
I believe sort of elegance, I think. They want to see class. Guys want to see nudes, for sure. Male clients of men.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
Guys.
So when people think of male sex workers, the more common thing is for male sex workers servicing men.
Yes, definitely.
So in the sex industry, from what I understand, heterosexual male escorts who only see women, you're in the minority. You're quite a niche.
Successful ones are in the niche. There's a lot of guys out there that will pop their photos up and say straight male escort, only see women, and a lot of them aren't the greatest guys. Let me put it that way. A lot of them are out there for free sex, basically, but not free, but as much sex as they can get. Yeah, exactly.
How can you tell the difference? What should you look for?
You need to look for a strong and long-lasting social media presence, comments on things they've done. You want to look for testimonials if the website they're on has testimonials. Even have a look at their own website if they're serious, if they'll have their own professional website. The guys that are legitimately into it will put good money into it before they start, whereas the other guys will just take random selfies and just bung it up on the directory and hope for the best usually.
What did you notice about the competition? That they were around your age, that they were younger? Is there a type?
Definitely not around my age. I think I was probably the second oldest out there at the time.
It's a young man's game?
Yeah, it definitely is, yeah. And it's a lot of the younger guys tend to do that alongside OnlyFans and their own sort of thing as well for supplementary income. For me, I was one of the older guys, which by default got me work, which, because a lot of sort of middle-aged women, they don't want to be with their sons, and that often, rippling, chiseled six-packs and that sort of thing it can be quite intimidating. So just generally coming across as a kind, safe and likable sort of guy already put me in front of a lot of the other guys I found.
So you were on a directory, and what did she do? Did she text you? How did it work?
She texted me mentioning that she was sort of interested, and then I remember I was driving.
What do you mean sort of interested?
Well, she was just sort of testing the waters. Most people do, like when they're sending an inquiry. It's not rare, but most people don't know what they're doing when they contact a male escort. And that's one thing I want to do is act as an intermediary between clients and escorts at some point, because women go into it and they say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help me, sort of thing. So this is what this person did. And she was turning 30. And I remember I was driving and I got a phone call, and it was from her friends. And they were all sort of hovered around the phone and all sort of like, ooh, giggling and everything on. They had me on speaker. And so I just sort of said, yeah, I'm happy to see, let me know.
Her friends booked you for her?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
And is that ethical when you're a surprise?
Oh, no, it wasn't a surprise. She was there as well. She knew full, yeah, exactly, yeah. It's not ethical as a surprise, no.
What reason did they give and she give for wanting to book you?
She'd been cheated on by a long-term boyfriend. And being 30, she was actually quite young, like on the younger end of the scale of people that booked me. So she'd been really hurt by a guy, and she just needed to get back on the horse, so to speak.
And you were that horse.
Yeah.
So what did you do next?
Well, I got really nervous to begin with, set the date. I think I went shopping to buy myself some clothes to make myself feel as hot as I possibly could. And then the time came, and, I had to get down to the peninsula at 8 or 8:30 or something like that. So, as we were putting my son to bed, I was just getting myself all prim and proper and clipped.
Did you manscape?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, definitely, yeah.
Did you ask her before, like in that phone call, what her expectations were or what she wanted?
Not specifically, because at that point, I didn't know really what to expect either, because she was my first. So I was getting ready, took the drive down there. The friends met me at the bottom of the motel, and it was a motel, an old school motel.
Where they'd booked a room?
Yep.
So were they being quite protective?
Yeah, they were, definitely. She was up in the room already.
Yeah.
And they were just sort of like, oh my God, they were all excited and everything. And it was quite fun. It was actually really sort of natural and organic. Then I went and knocked on the door and couldn't believe what I was doing at the time. It was just surreal even thinking back to it. Knocked on the door, and then this beautiful young 30-year-old just standing there, hi, just sort of shaking, and just she was absolutely petrified. And I'd come to see that a lot in so many clients over my time.
Just nerves.
Absolute, yeah, just sheer terror. I guess because it's such an unknown and such a new experience, and they didn't know what to expect.
Were they scared, like physically, that you might harm them, or were they just nervous because of internalized shame or couldn't believe what they were going to do, fear of the unknown? What do you think it was?
I hope to death it wasn't anything to do with safety. I'm sure that does come into women's minds for sure. And one reason I started doing phone calls before bookings was to reassure them and just let them know that, all right, I'll be checking in every time we do something new, just really reassuring them that it'd be okay. Then, and the option not to do anything is always on the table as well. That's the other thing, There's a phrase, you're not paid to come along, you're paid to piss off. So that's what it is.
Yeah, right.
So I think she was...
So letting them know they have control.
Yeah, always.
At every step.
Yeah, exactly. But also taking control myself, showing them and leading them the way, because that's almost always wanted as well, because they didn't know what they were doing. So I think in that particular situation, she didn't know what to expect and didn't know how it was going to play out.
How was it different to having sex with someone who wasn't paying you?
I guess unpaid sex, you might sort of let yourself go before she's come sometimes. You might be a little bit selfish if she says it's all right. I was always a pleaser in bed, and I would prefer, got pleasure out of others' pleasure. But when you were being paid for it, there was sort of mental checklists that you had, it was like, all right, make sure she's calmed down and make sure everything's, checked in and she's okay, and put the music on, all that sort of thing, make it a real experience for her, I think. And everything is about the client, absolutely everything. So you're just looking in their eyes, you're reading their body signals. If they start stiffening up at you doing something, you just pull back. Little tips I give to guys who ask me, who are going in the industry, things like, never touch people's necks because you don't know what trauma they've been through. So many different things that you learn, and being paid is just entirely about them.
How much did it cost that first time?
That one was only $300.
For how long?
An hour.
And what do you get for that? Whatever you want?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. It wasn't long enough for me. I started making it 2 hours, but
why
usually,
is that?
Because it was too rushed for me. For me personally, I need to build up a bond with the person I was with, I found. And women love anticipation too. That's an incredibly sexy thing. So rather than diving into things, just flirting is wonderful. And I had a client once who I was flirting for ages, and I said to her, you realise you can just kiss me whenever you want. And sort of this little light bulb went off in her head, and she just dived on me and kissed me. So I was like, it was really cute. How
do you negotiate the actual, okay, can you give me the money now? Like, is that awkward? Was that awkward that first time?
No, it's not usually awkward. Usually we talk about that on the phone or the text or something like that. Usually it's just an envelope that's put on the table. I'll just say, oh, that's for you. You just say, oh, thank you so much. And then you just make as little deal of it as possible.
What if they forget?
You'd usually do like a transfer of funds or something like that.
But how do you bring it up? Like if the envelope's not there, they don't have cash with them, forgot to go to the ATM.
I would leave it to the last minute usually. I'd be almost on the way out, and then I'd be like, oh, did you need my bank details or something like that?
Yeah, right. I imagine it's a bit of a buzzkill if you do it too
exactly.
early.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You want to get it out of the way as soon as you can, or just not mention it until the experience is over. And you don't want it coming crashing back down to earth in a second, but you do need to let them know, you're there for a reason, and it's your profession. I made a living out of it.
When you left, were her friends still there?
They were actually. They were.
Did they make an archway for you to run through?
like a plane going. It's like the water cannons. They were downstairs. Yeah, I left her in the bedroom, gave her a big hug and kiss, and closed the door. And they were down there. They were sinking, I don't know, bourbon and cokes or something like that at the time. And they said, "Oh, see you later, Mitch. Thanks so much for that." And then you could just see them just run up the stairs to go and see how it went with her. And then, later on, I got a message, do you strip as well? I was like...
And did you?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I'd be horrifically embarrassed. I couldn't do it. I don't know. I'd feel like an idiot, I think. I don't know. I was 41 at the time, and stripping is another talent altogether, really.
You've got to be able to dance.
You do. You've got to dance. You've got to play the crowd. It's a totally different beast entirely.
But you tried to do a porno.
I did.
Tell me about that.
That porno. I thought I was the luckiest guy on earth. I got to be in a porno without doing any sort of auditioning or anything like that. I didn't get to hear who my co-star was until the week before. I got flown up here to Sydney. It was just kind of surreal. Like there was a script that we went through. We had all our tests, visual tests for any sort of STIs or anything like that. And apparently
a visual inspection.
Yeah, as well as a medical certificate proving that you'd been tested.
And did they take you through, here's the storyline. What did you have to be?
I had to be a client of a masseuse, and the masseuse was a childhood crush of mine.
Oh.
And miraculously, I walked into a massage parlour and there she was. So,
amazing.
Yeah. And,
such coincidence.
Oh, yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how these things happen in pornos, yeah.
And so on the set, what happened?
Well, I went through all the acting. Apparently I acted really well. And then it came down to, all right, that's enough of the acting. This is what's going to happen now. All right, we're going to be filming. She's going to blow you for a little while. Then you have sex. We need to get shots of this or that. I'm going to give you a 5-minute countdown. And then during that time, if you can try and come and just,
What, like the clock starts 5 minutes. Can you please come when it gets to 0?
Yep. Or during that 5 minutes.
You've got a 5-minute window.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like they've got enough footage of the other stuff, so now they just need the cum shot.
The money shot.
The money shot, exactly. Just talking about it, I just was useless. My cock just went nowhere. It was just shriveled, absolutely shriveled, went nowhere. So they fortunately gave me a little bit of time to, recoup myself and said, go into a bedroom. But when you come out hard. It was really, really quite cold actually when I look back on it.
Are there not pills you can take?
Well, you can take pills, but pills don't actually work unless you're turned on.
Really?
Yeah. My job would have been a lot easier if I could have taken a Cialis or a Viagra.
Yeah.
And if you can take them and stare at a brick wall and get a hard on, then anyone can be an escort.
I thought that's how they worked.
No, not at all. No, you can take as many as you want. And unless you have
something to work with.
Yeah, unless you prompt the blood flow to go down to your penis, then it doesn't actually work at all. So your mind has to be into it as much as your body.
I imagine they say these things on porn sets a lot. What did the actress say?
She was wonderful. She was so kind. She was saying this happens more often than not. And
really?
It does, yeah. So I totally tip my hat to the guys that consistently do it and just manage to pull it off so many times, in front of cameras. It's a whole skill, and it takes acting to the next level, I think, to control your body the way they do.
My favourite part of this story is you calling your wife, who you were still married to at the time, for a pep talk.
Yeah, she was so sweet. She was just, every time I talk about her, I just remember how nice she was. Yeah, I had to take a walk and I was really affected. I felt, I was super nervous even going up there to the point I think that's why I failed. The fear of failure was almost too much. So I went for a walk and sat on some rocks overlooking some crashing water up, along the coast up here in Sydney, and just gave her a call and said, I'm failing. I can't do this. This is the worst. And I was literally had tears in my eyes at the time. And she's like, you can do it. Don't worry, you can do it. She sent me like this risque photo that she'd taken,
of herself.
Yeah, she was just wonderful.
She's a team player.
Oh, she was. She cared. She just cared about my mental health so much. But no, I went back down there and failed again. And then they said, all right, well, we've got time tomorrow, but, just get a good night's sleep, go to these sex stores because they'll sell you Viagra or Cialis. It's like, well, next morning I came back even worse and it was just no go. And I'm glad. I'm really glad because I thought it was something that I would enjoy, but it was a force of the universe that made it not happen. So there's no sort of record out there of me being on it. You know what I mean?
Up next, there are more questions for Mitch or Dan, including how much he charges and what types of women book him, and also his sort of descent into drugs. Things got really ugly for a while there before he pulled himself out of it. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Something that comes through in your book, which is probably unexpected for a lot of people, it was for me, is firstly how nervous you would get before meeting new clients. And secondly, what a softie you are. And I don't mean that in an erectional sense.
I know what you mean, yeah.
You're a big softie. Like you're so like even the name of your book, Time for Her, a memoir of true romance, that might seem like it's almost taking the piss because, you're paid to have sex with people. But you talk with all your clients about needing some kind of emotional connection.
Definitely.
To be able to go through with it.
Yeah.
To be able to be turned on and to be able to even not be turned on, but to be able to get an erection and actually, do your job.
Yeah. I think it's just how I'm wired. It's funny. I've gone into bookings and there's been zero connection and it hasn't been working. But then I've started talking to them about their histories and about things that have happened. And I don't want this to sound perverse or anything, but they've started crying and it's made me hard.
Okay.
Because the reason is because I feel like I was getting through and making a difference, and it sort of brought out a nurturing side in me, I think. So I'd sort of cuddle, and the effect of me cuddling and disarming them gave me a feeling of worth and therefore made me feel, I guess, strong and sexy.
Mm.
So,
and also, I guess that's intimacy. Like if someone can cry in front of you,
yeah,
that's showing a level of vulnerability and intimacy.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And trust in you.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of clients, understandably, they have a barrier up when they first meet me or first used to meet me. I'd have a barrier up and I'd done it a few times, so I knew how to sort of get them talking and get them trusting me quickly. But it was something that I needed to have. I needed to have that bond before lovemaking could take place. And lovemaking, not sex, like actual passionate lovemaking. And once leaving a booking, having achieved that was just a wonderful feeling, not the physical side of it, that was nice too, but just having made a difference and picked up somebody's mood and made them feel really good. It was really nice. It was wonderful.
After that first time, things sped up.
Yes.
You got busier.
Yep.
Over the time you were working, did the women who booked your services or inquired about them fall into some particular categories? I know every woman was different, obviously, but you must have noticed some commonalities as to why women would book you.
Yeah. Women usually booked me after something significant had happened in their lives. So like the 30-year-old, she'd had her heart well and truly torn apart. Other women had been in loveless marriages for decades. It was like the flip side of how I felt a little bit with my ex. They were craving intimacy, not necessarily sex, just validation, just hugs, touching, just some sort of intimacy. And they tended to be sort of 40 to 55 years old on average, roughly. But they always had a feeling of needing to empower themselves when they contacted me. So I always say that you contacting me is you at your bravest now. Don't think you're at your weakest. You actually reaching out and doing that is you finally taking control, and you're incredibly brave doing this. So give yourself a pat on the back. Just, even if we don't go ahead with a booking, which often happened, we'd just talk and she'd be like, oh, I really enjoyed the talk. And I'll be like, that's fine. Just let me know if you ever want to see me, sort of thing. But they were always just well and truly taking control of their lives again when they booked. So
that's so interesting. On that, I guess an example of that would be the widow that you saw, the woman who was in her early 70s. How did that booking come about?
She contacted me via text. She was over in Perth and her husband had some serious medical issues for the previous, I think it was like 5 years or something, and he was in pretty serious decline before he passed away. And even before that, it had been maybe 12 years before that she'd ever actually made love to him. So she contacted me. She was quite determined in what she said. She was saying, I'd like to see you for an overnight booking. By the way, I'm a mature woman, quite a bit older than you. And I was like, okay, all right. And I had to suss out sort of roughly how old. And she said, she was 72 at the time. And it just went from there. Yeah. So
how did you feel about that? I imagine that's around your mum's age.
Yes, that was a concern. I didn't really panic too much at all because it was another lady wanting to reclaim something of herself. Age is sort of irrelevant, really. And we had a nice dinner and it was very slow going. We danced a little bit and, there's some daggy music that she had and everything. And it was just very slow and very respectful to her husband who'd passed away. And just everything happened in the dark and it was all just very gentle and nice. And I saw her many times after that, actually.
You must know a lot about women's bodies.
Yeah, I've learned a fair bit.
And the different ways that they look and respond.
Yeah, well, they're very complex. Like women tend to, some like things a bit harder. But one thing I know is never do anything hard to start with, right? And use plenty of lube. That's a given. There's no shame in lube. I think it should be used in all sex. It just enhances it. generally, as I said before, women like a bit of a tease. You don't want to dive into things like that, and just always ask for permission before you do anything. And if something's working, keep doing it and don't stop.
That's true.
Yeah, if you girls are in the zone and you're getting there, the worst thing is for your minds to flick to something else or to think, oh, I'm taking too long, this is going to be annoying him. You just reassure him, no, I'm enjoying this, just lock me out, just do what you need and I'll just keep going. Just tell me, if you want me to keep going, stop, higher, lower, whatever. So,
how easy do women find it to give you directions?
Very difficult, but I prompt it. I don't want to talk too much in case, I'm in the right area. And you can sort of feel if you are based on...
You might have your mouth full.
Well, exactly, yeah, yeah. But if you do and they're just sitting, you can see them tensing up and like trying to come, then it's like, all right, don't change a thing because they're getting there, So little things like that, you pick up little things like that through the job.
The question that most people would have, and I've heard you ask this a lot, is what about sexual attraction?
It never really was an issue, to be honest, because, as I said, it's about that mental connection. It's about feeling wanted, me feeling wanted and making them feel wanted, and that usually got me erect and got me, turned on.
What are women most insecure about?
Well, their bodies, obviously, but which part of their bodies just depends on what, at the time. I know older women tend to start looking at their necks a lot. For some strange reason, you're all concerned about getting wrinkly necks and you put scarves on to cover them up, but things like that. Or scars. What are those?
Cesarean
scars, yeah. That's often something they're concerned about. Sagging breasts, you name it. You girls find everything possibly to find wrong with yourselves as you can.
How would you reassure someone? Because it's very vulnerable,
It
right?
is, yeah. I found when we were naked, it got to that point, I actually gently would kiss the areas that they weren't happy with. I would do that very gently because that's obviously a very vulnerable thing to do. But I'd just try and reassure them, if they had a bit of a belly, then I'd sort of just kiss their belly or, stroke and just let them know that it was a pleasure to be in that area, which it was, and if it was something specific and they'd say, oh, don't look at my cellulite or something, it's like, oh, don't be silly. Everyone's got cellulite and don't worry about it. You're a world-weary, beautiful woman that's gone through a lot and it's a turn on.
And was it?
Yeah, it was. It really was.
So you didn't really have a type. You didn't have to like close your eyes and grit your teeth.
No, I've got my little fetishes though, like stupid little things like I like people wearing socks when I had sex with them.
You like them to wear socks because you don't like people's feet?
No, I just thought it was cute. I don't know. No,
like
yeah, I don't know why I mentioned that then, but now you've got me talking now, yeah. Or wearing like high heels, little things like
during
that.
Sex.
Yeah, just little things like that. I don't know how you got me onto that, so yeah.
What about things that are real turn-offs for you? How do you get around that?
Oh, sometimes you can't. Turn-offs tend to resonate within, so it tends to be their personalities that are the turn-offs.
Can you remember some examples of clients that have just done things or said things that have just really shut you down?
Yeah, I mentioned one of them in the book actually when a client said to me, I was trying to snuggle with her and trying to get into that sort of zone in a particularly seedy house that smelt really bad. She said, I didn't pay for hugs, babe, I paid for dick. And then that was like, oh, okay, here we go. And then it just went south from there sort of thing. And I just felt like an object. And I wrapped it up early. I said, look, I think I'll have to get moving soon. So I just gave her a refund for the rest of the time and left.
I would have thought that wouldn't have been completely unusual, that there would have been, not that it's okay, but there would have been people who were like,
yeah, just want the physical aspect.
I just want it.
Yeah.
I paid for it.
Yeah.
That are quite, not proprietorial, but like objectifying.
Yeah.
Which obviously didn't do it for you, but how did you deal with that?
I suppose I tried to slow it down for my own sake. If they were sort of just grabbing at clothes and, really prompting things to go too fast, I'd remember that I'm in control of my own body too. I've got my own sort of boundaries as well. So I would slow it down and say, hey, can we just talk for a little while? And they'd be like, oh, okay. And it's just a bit, I know, towards the end of my career, it was rare because I would have those pre-work phone calls and I would suss out what I was wanted for. And if it was just a matter of just going in there, pounding away for an hour and then leaving, then I'd formulated a nice little text and say, look, I think I'm probably not the right escort for you. If you'd like me to suggest other people, let me know, sort of thing.
I want to know about those conversations and the clients that you turned down. What are some examples of that? Phone calls that just did not progress?
it wasn't usually just after the phone call. There might have been a few text messages in between, but I would sort of very gently and as compassionately as possible sort of let them start knowing that I wasn't interested, sort of.
But what would
hard
make
to
you
say.
say that? Like, would it be the way they spoke to you? Would it be, how would those conversations go? Like, what would you ask them?
One thing I'd like to know is how many other escorts they'd been with, because
Why?
I found that, I don't want to sound bad, but I found that a lot of the women that had seen a lot did start to objectify the guys that they were with. And they'd say, oh, I saw so-and-so in this place. And they'd often say mean things about them. There was occasions where I saw clients who were using me to actually get over previous escorts that had hurt them, or physically or emotionally as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if that was a situation, that'd be fine. But it was sort of, if I was being employed in a purely physical sense and not as a therapeutic sort of sense, I'd get that feeling. And I didn't want to waste anyone's time, and I didn't want to turn up to a booking absolutely petrified that I wouldn't be able to do the job. So I think it was far more compassionate to just shut it down then and there rather than to sort of try it and fail.
So you weren't interested in wham bam, thank you, ma'am?
No, not at all. I wanted far more depth than that, definitely. I wanted to help as much as I could. I wanted to try and help them mend. I mean, it's not my job to mend anyone, they mend themselves, but I wanted to be a stepping stone and to make a difference. And that's sort of how my career progressed, to the point where I started seeing very few new clients, and I just saw regular, like a doctor or psychiatrist would see their clients over a number of years. So
How does that work when you see someone over a number of years? What's the line between that being a relationship and that being a transaction?
it's a fine line. The money is a big factor. That's obviously the big barrier. But it was a relationship. I had a few clients who I was really close with. I went through some horrific things that they'd been through with them, alongside them, unpaid. So that was probably my bad, and that kind of blurred boundaries a lot.
What do you mean unpaid?
Just I flew up to Brisbane to be with someone while she was mediating with her ex-husband for nothing, just to be company with her. I'd been to hospitals when people had been hurt while they were being examined, things like that.
So you became like friends?
Very much so, yeah. Like boyfriend and girlfriend, yeah. And towards the end of my career, I recognised that was actually being detrimental to them, and I was holding them back. And
In what way?
I didn't want anyone to be dependent on me for their happiness and have to pay for that, like, continually, even though it sounds like an oxymoron considering what I did and why I did it. But after a while, I felt bad taking money for something that is just human nature. It should just be kindness. So that's where I started to get conflicted later on.
I imagine that for a lot of women, the idea of you falling in love with them is a fantasy, or maybe a hope.
Yep, definitely, yeah.
Like that one day you'll go, you know what, you don't have to pay for this.
Yeah.
Did you have to navigate that?
All the time. Yeah, that was tough.
How did you do it?
Because I worked all around the country, that sort of helped as well. Like, I wouldn't be in specific cities at the drop of a hat. Sometimes I would if they wanted me to be. If I had nothing on that week, I'd just fly up and see them. But that was a very hard thing to do, actually, to be compassionate and authentic, but also professional. It was really hard.
Have boundaries,
yeah. I did that badly. I freely admit. I didn't do boundaries very well, and I got too involved a lot, but I don't regret it. It's just me. It's just how I was, and I don't know. It's what they needed, and yeah,
You talk in the book about taking more and more drugs to get through it. A lot of coke.
Yeah, a lot of coke, yeah.
How did your escalating drug problem affect your ability to have sex with people?
It didn't actually. It didn't at all. I wanted to do a good job, and I knew if I was hungover or high or tweaking or whatever, it was disrespectful to the client.
Tweaking?
Oh, like peeking out of your head off, if you had too many lines of coke or whatever, or MD or something like that, It's just disrespectful if I go into a job like that, and I never did that. Like, I might have been a little bit, had a line maybe before, just if I was a little bit tired, but I was always present for the client that I was with. If I had time off or if I was by myself feeling particularly bad or depressed, then I'd start racking up lines and just sort of listening to music and watching the clock go before we got out of lockdown and stuff.
How did you get past it?
Just moderation. I think when you're an addict, you're always an addict. I don't think you can ever really go completely stone cold sober. But if you give yourself a reward for something well done, a small amount of something, or like having a beer at the end of the day sort of thing.
So you were able to pull it back from the brink?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. I knew it was a problem. My nose was feeling terrible and I was waking up at sort of 1 PM. It was just really unhealthy. And I had a son to think about as well. I couldn't just completely just shut down my whole family, and I had to grow up. And it was only sort of for a few months, but it was just a few months of just complete indulgence. I eventually thought, all right, enough's enough. Every now and then, okay, whatever. I'm not an angel, we've all got our problems. But I pulled it back, which was good.
How long after you started escorting did your marriage end?
Oh, it probably lasted about, I think 8 or 9 months it was. It was a mutual decision. We both knew that there was something wrong. It wasn't a matter of her just booting me out of the house or me just walking out. It was we'd sort of alluded to things going wrong. And then one day she said, I think it's time you moved out. And I said, yep, I think you're probably right, And it's such a daunting experience. It's like waiting for an impending amputation or something, you're going to be lonely. You're going to be by yourself. I'm not going to see my boy every day. It's going to be 2 people in that house rather than 3. But it ended as well as it possibly could, which is why we're friends today.
I know it's simplistic looking for one reason, but do you think that deciding to open your marriage and then become an escort, do you think that was the beginning of the end?
I think it would have ended anyway, to be honest. I think I was never the sensible 9-to-5 responsible sort of person that she wanted and she deserved.
She gave it a red hot crack.
She did.
Being encouraging.
Yeah, she did. But, I spent a lot of many hours wandering around parks with my son attached to my chest, absolutely bored shitless, going out of my mind, like trying to, as a mother, you go insane. You literally can stare at a wall and just look at your watch and think, oh, God, 4 hours to go. When is she getting home? You go nuts. So I feel like I put in some hard yards as well.
Absolutely.
As a stay-at-home dad, it was really tough.
How much did you cost and how do you decide how much to charge?
Originally, I started at $300 an hour. I ended up, my last rates before I finished up was 2 hours for $1,000. Overnight was $5,500. That went up, you could do a week for 15 or 20 grand or something from memory. But you just know your worth. You can see what's out there and the effort you put in and what I was happy to walk away with and what I wasn't happy to walk away with. And it sounds greedy, and towards the end, it did feel greedy, but you just need to know your worth and what you give to the person you're with and the toll that it takes. So I would just occasionally, every year or so up my rates a little bit more just to take that into account. What
sort of women have that kind of money and want to spend it on an escort? Because you would imagine, is it really rich ladies?
No,
there was
everyone.
One woman who was a cleaner who you saw.
Yeah, everyone, all types. It's like saving for a holiday. Ladies would say, I've been saving up to see you for 6 months, or not necessarily rich at all. The wealthier ones could see me more often, for sure. Sometimes married to wealthy people or wealthy in their own right, company owners. Others were just single women that were just on a good income and had a low mortgage, so they had plenty of expendable income, that sort of thing. It's definitely not something that's just strictly restricted to rich people, that's for sure.
One woman was living at home with her mum.
Yeah, she was.
That was awkward, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a little bit awkward. You could say that.
What happened?
She was an accountant from memory, and she was very prim and proper and very definite on the time that I was to be there. And I was thinking, oh, okay, fair enough. Yep, 7 o'clock. I heard you the first time. It's all right. And then I get there and it was this odd townhouse assisted living-y sort of place. I was like, well, this is a bit strange. And then I walked into the house and there's all this old school furniture and I think, hang on, what's this all about? And then she showed me a bedroom and said, oh, I got the little bedroom. My housemate got the bigger one. And I started wondering at that point, to be honest. But anyway, we kept going and then there was a rattle of keys in the door. And And she just shat herself completely and was just, we had a great time up until then. I actually laughed, to be honest. Like, it was just so funny. I didn't want to be mean to her, but next thing you know, had some undies on at least. And then this woman pops her head around and go, "Oh, hello, darling. Oh, hello. Hi. How are you?" And then I was like, "Oh, hi." And then she just she just walked down the corridor, but I could still hear her in the house. And it was just, I didn't know how to get out of it. Fortunately, I'd had taken payment earlier, and the poor client was just absolutely mortified. Just, it was just, it was quite funny in hindsight, but I never saw her again. But it was fun up until that point. It was good.
Something that happened that wasn't a chuckle at all. A lot of sex workers, obviously, particularly female sex workers, have issues around consent and sexual assault. Not something that you would have thought would have been an issue for you. You're a big strapping man. But you did have an experience with a client that went bad.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that happened?
I've actually had a couple, but the one in the chapter that I mentioned, I believe she did have some sort of a man-hate thing going. I don't know what it was, like a power sort of imbalance go on that she wanted to address. So I was going down on her and she just wrapped her thighs around my neck and like really squeezed really hard and pushed my head in between onto her even harder. So I literally couldn't breathe. She sort of started changing and getting a bit weird and had this sort of evil, kinky sort of like, "Yeah, you like that? Yeah. And I was just like, hang on a minute, this is not going in the right direction at all. I mean, I didn't fear for my life or anything, but I was just really uncomfortable and I couldn't breathe. So I just wrenched her legs around, flipped her over and just pulled her off me. I didn't barrel her out. I said, well, I kind of did. I just said, what the fuck was all that about?
And what did she say?
Oh, she was like, "Oh, sorry, wasn't that cool, babe? Sorry," acting kind of all stupid about it. I was not happy at that at all. And she was like, "Oh, it's okay, come back to bed." And I was like, "No, I'm gone. I'm out of here. You've blown it." So I just didn't give her a refund, didn't give her anything, just walked. So I was furious at that one. But that's a rarity. That really is. I've heard of a situation of a male escort being stabbed by a partner that's walked in before.
All right.
But that's a very, very rare one as well. I haven't heard many bad stories for the guys. It's the girls that they really put themselves in some pretty precarious situations and they have to be really careful with their screening. And you get clients that get all annoyed at all the questions they've got to answer or having to provide ID. And to those guys, I say, well, tough shit, do it, because that's part of the job. If you want to meet these wonderful women, then that's what you got to do. So otherwise, go somewhere else,
This wasn't the end of my conversation with Mitch. There is a second part to this episode because I wanted to ask him if he ever fell in love with any of the women who paid him for sex. And the answer is actually yes. So he talks about that. And he also spoke about one of the most moving stories from his book and his life and his time as a male escort, which was his experience with a client called Sam, who had Alzheimer's and made a decision before things got really bad and she wasn't able to consent anymore, that she wanted an ongoing relationship with Mitch, and that really, really affected him. Here's a little bit of what he said.
When I actually couldn't get it up for her, I couldn't get her erect, she just said, "I want you hard. Why aren't you hard? Let's fuck. I want to be hard." And it was quite confronting.
And I also asked him about the last time he was paid for sex and why, in fact, it was the last time. You can listen to that episode right now by clicking on the link in the show notes. The executive producer of No Filter is Kimberly Bradish, with sound production by Maddie Joannou. Remember, you can get Mitch's book called Time for Her also via a link in the show notes.